So good evening and welcome. My name is Rose Dahlan. I'm the Change and Engagement Manager at the Climate Change Transformation Team. Welcome to our third Net Zero Isle of Man Together for Our Planet webinar series, organized to run at the same time as COP26, which is currently happening in Glasgow. Before I go on, just some housekeeping before we start. This event is recorded and we will share it on our YouTube and website and social media. So if you prefer not to have your faces on the video, please turn off your video and you can still see the presentation and hear Nicole. The presentation will roughly take about an hour and we've allocated about 30 minutes at the end for any Q&A. However, if you have any burning questions as Nicole presents, please feel free to type your questions in the chat, which you can find at the top bar of the screen. And what will happen is at the end of the presentation, I'll read out the questions for Nicole to answer. And last but not least, as shown earlier on, please turn off your mic during the event to minimize any disruptions. So let's get back to the event. So COP26 UN Conference of Parties, a very crucial climate change summit, which started earlier this week in Glasgow. And so far, we've heard a lot of commitments and actions by various countries around the world, from reversing deforestation, cutting down methane emissions, financial investments, and all really big and important decisions. And therefore, that's why Net Zero Isle of Man here on the Isle of Man is working with stakeholders to bring together a program of events for Isle of Man residents to raise awareness of COP26 and local climate action. So basically, in addition to what governments are doing to set up the infrastructure, what we ourselves as individuals and communities can do to tackle climate change. And this presentation tonight is part of that program of events, and we're very pleased to have with us a very special guest, a former astronaut, Nicole Stott. Nicole is a NASA veteran. She worked in the Space Shuttle and the International Space Station. She is an artist, an activist. She works to protect the planet. Nicole is the founder of the Space for Art Foundation, which partnered with Actionaid to help bring young people's voices to COP this year. She also spoke in a panel, Earth Observer, at COP26 earlier this week. She is the 10th woman to walk in space. Nicole is an American, but no stranger to the Isle of Man. Her husband, Chris Stott, is from the Isle of Man, which makes her an honorary Manxie. She has great connections here on the island, and some of you might have seen or heard her spoke when she was here a few years ago. Tonight, in her talk entitled Back to Earth, she will share with us what life in space has taught her about planet Earth, as well as how to protect it. So without further ado, I will hand the virtual mic to Nicole. Nicole, over to you.
Thank you, Rose, and everyone. Really nice to be here. I wish I could be on the Isle of Man with you. I'm very close. Left Glasgow today to head to Manchester for a couple interviews and then on to London, but would have been nice to make that hop across the Irish Sea to be with you in person, or however we could have done that on the island. Just to be on the island would be nice. And I look forward to the next opportunity for that. As Rose mentioned, for the past week, I have been in Glasgow. The group that I work with, Space for Art Foundation, which is an organization that we think of it as a space-themed art therapy program, and we have the motto that we are uniting a planetary community of children through the awe and wonder of space exploration and the healing power of art. And I'm gonna kind of shut up a little bit about that now, because I want to share more with you on how that came together and how we got to COP26 through that kind of interesting space art and healing path, and hopefully it will make sense to you when we do talk about it. But I thought I'd start. Rose has a video that she can play. It's just like a 3-minute video. I recently released a book that has the same title as what we are calling this presentation tonight, which is Back to Earth, What Life in Space Taught Me About Our Home Planet and Our Mission to Protect It. And I don't want this, and I don't mean it to be like the shameless plug for the book, though I really do hope that you'll read it. And there's some Isle of Man goodies in there. What I really thought would be nice is that this is a book trailer that my publisher put together that I think really fits perfectly with what we're talking about tonight, with the COP26 activities, and how just kind of sums up the feelings I had in response to my experience in space and coming back to Earth. So why don't we play that, and then we'll get into the presentation. I've been blessed to experience our planetary home from some extraordinary vantage points. From inner space on the Aquarius undersea habitat to outer space on the International Space Station. Witnessing the complexity of human survival in these extreme environments, I discovered 3 unifying and life-changing lessons. We live on a planet, an overwhelmingly beautiful, glowing, colorful, crystal clear planet. We are all Earthlings, and the only border that matters is that thin blue line of atmosphere that blankets and protects us all. We build our spaceships as mechanical life support systems, like the ISS, to mimic as best we can what Earth does for us naturally. As a crew on the space station, we know that our survival depends on staying acutely aware of the health and well-being of our atmosphere, of our spaceship, and of all our crewmates. In contrast, here on Spaceship Earth, we pollute our atmosphere, our oceans, and our soils. We are experiencing devastating impacts to our planetary life support system and to all life we share our planet with. To survive and thrive, we must bring these 3 simple lessons of planet, Earthling, and thin blue line into our daily lives. I came back to Earth knowing that by behaving like crewmates, not passengers, we have the power to create a future for all life on Earth that's as beautiful as it looks from space. Okay. I don't, these video conferencing things, I don't think they ever get I don't know about you guys, but I was way out of sync on on the words in the video, but hopefully it came across okay. I'm going to go ahead and share my slides now. Let's see if we can make it work, Rose. I know I was challenged before. All right, how's that? Can you see?
Yes, that's perfect.
Okay, thank you. All right, so I don't know, I'll probably say this a few times throughout the presentation. It's something that just really comes home to me in response to my time in space. I shared it with you in that video, in all the complexity of getting off this planet and into space, of living and working there, even for a short period of time, of traveling safely back to Earth. In all of that complexity, I really and truly came home with these 3 simple truths. And we all learn them at a very young age. And I guess I'm on this mission for everyone to like reinvigorate them and bring them back into your daily lives. I think it's a really powerful thing that we live on a planet. We are all Earthlings. And the only border that matters is that thin blue line of atmosphere that blankets and protects us all. Now, at COP26, I've been asked a number of times, why space? Why are we going to space? Why are we spending money in space when we should be solving our problems here on Earth? And I know, NASA and our space agencies don't do a good job necessarily explaining this all the time. I know there's been a lot in the news about business people, some very wealthy individuals creating new space businesses, launching billionaires into space. But I would argue, and even in all of that, that everything we are doing, and I can say this for sure with respect to the International Space Station, everything we are doing in that place, on that place, is ultimately about improving life on Earth. And that's why our motto of off the Earth, for the Earth fits so, just so perfectly for this program. And also, I love that the COP26, one of their mottos for this year's conference is Together for the Planet. And that's exactly how we're working on the International Space Station as an international community of 5 international space agencies, NASA, Russia, the European Space Agency representing 11 countries, the Japanese agency, and then also Canadian. So for the past 21 years, as of 2 days ago, we have had continuous human presence in space with all of the work there, all of the relationships being developed there, ultimately about improving life on Earth. And I don't know how you can look at this picture and not see this spacecraft as a masterpiece in space. I think it is absolutely the best example of living off the grid that you can find. It is a world-class laboratory. It actually is built as a laboratory so that we can do the science that's happening there across these different countries. And the international relationships are pretty important in all of this as well, that we can be living peacefully, successfully as this community, off the planet. Now, one of the things I love about this picture too, and it came up a little bit in the video, is that, this is a mechanical life support system in space. We purposely build this space station, all of our spacecraft, to mimic what Earth does for us naturally. So while we're there as this crew of 6 or 7 people on board, every day we have to know how much CO2 is in our atmosphere, how much clean drinking water we have, the integrity of our thin metal hull, the health and well-being of all of our crewmates. Because if we don't, we won't survive. And I know that that's a very immediate threat to the crew of 6 or 7 on board this station. But I would argue that it applies exactly the same way to all of us, the 7 billion plus people here on Spaceship Earth, and that the reality is that our number one green job, and that was something that came up during some of the discussions here at COP26, this idea of what are the best green jobs. I would say that our number one green job is to learn really and truly how to live like crewmates and not passengers here on Spaceship Earth. So we build these mechanical life support systems in space because, we want to do the science there. We want to have people there, the fleshy ones in this place doing this science. And we want to learn more about ourselves as the experiment in space. What's happening to our body in this extreme environment. How do we apply that not only to how we might explore further off our planet, but also to bringing back that, that new information to battle diseases, to learn about the way our bodies respond, in different situations. How do we bring that back to Earth as well? These are the gentlemen that I spent my time with during my 3 months on my first space flight. I show this picture because it's fun. You look at this and you can see there's no up or down. We can float in all directions. We have our fancy little flight suits on that give you some indication of which country we're from and how that all comes together. And you can tell that we are enjoying ourselves there. And I think, the best crewmates, the best teams to work with are the ones where you're going to be excited about the work you're doing. You're going to feel good about it, and you're going to be having a good time. There's the personality in it all. And also, I look at these people and I know that even with those clown noses on, that if the emergency alarm went off while we were taking this photo and it was telling us that all of the air was spewing out of our space station, that we would be rallying for each other, we would have each other's back, and we'd be doing everything humanly possible to keep all of our crew safe and to get the environment into a safe situation again. And I know that every single one of these people trusted that I would have their back as well. And again, I would argue that, here on Earth, I think we want to live healthy, happy lives. We want to know that our fellow crewmates, our fellow humans, and all of the rest of the life we share this planet with are living healthy, happy lives. And then at the same time, we should know that when our life support system is threatened, that we will have each other's backs. And that's what living like crew is all about. So just as a little insight to why we even go to the International Space Station, why do we go and orbit our Earth 16 times a day and do this science there? It's because we can take gravity out of the equation. We can look at things from a whole new different perspective. And through those new perspectives, and we all know it, even here on Earth, when we apply diverse thought to things, when we kind of think of things in ways we might not have before, when we invite people to share their ideas, we almost always end up with a better solution to the problem at hand. And we can always learn new things about stuff we already thought we knew a lot about. And that's going on the space station in pretty much every area of science that you can imagine. We are looking at it in all new ways. Again, bringing all of that knowledge and what we learned back to Earth as well. Now, it's not just through the science that we're looking at things from a new perspective either. As astronauts, we think of ourselves as Earth observers. We think of ourselves as observers of the entire environment that we're now able to take part in on this mechanical life support system. And I can tell you that astronauts find real joy in the opportunity to get in front of a window, to look out those windows, to experience Earth as our home from space. And if you have free time, this is where you are. This is a place called the Cupola Module on the space station. It's an Earth-facing kind of bay window. It sticks out a little bit from the station itself, facing Earth. And so when you're in this place, you can roll around, move around, and you can float around and see absolutely horizon to horizon views of the planet. And it is overwhelmingly beautiful. It's inspiring. It's the place where I had that wake-up call of, oh my gosh, I live on a planet. How did I not, keep that in mind? And it's the discovery of absolutely the interconnectivity, the interconnectivity of everything and everyone that we know inhabits this place, and of the planet itself. And I think there's no denying it from this place. One of the things that I've spoken about in particular during this time at COP26 in Glasgow is that, I think about our leaders in this place, our delegates. I know the Isle of Man, but Rose, what did you say, that your team has just gotten there today or is arriving tomorrow?
They just arrived yesterday.
Okay, so they just arrived yesterday, and they're all going to be in these. They're going to be in these conference centers, and they're going to be around tables, and yeah, they'll have some really beautiful visuals behind them and stuff. But I can't help but think that if we could just take those leaders, those delegates, and float them in a window like this, have them, floating freely there, their heads kind of bouncing off each other as they experience, the beauty, the awe, the wonder of this planet that's our home. I have to believe that they would be compelled in a way that would just drive them to take the actions and not just make the commitments, but actually take the actions that are being discussed through all of these meetings. I wish this view for anybody who would want to experience it. Now, when I got to space, and I think this is a human nature thing, we go to new places and we're looking for the people, for the things that are familiar to us. And I certainly did this when I got into space and had my face in front of that window. And I wanted to see Florida from space. I grew up in Florida. I thought of Florida as my home. And so when I knew we were flying over Florida, I wanted to see Florida from space. And I remember looking through the window and having the view, the experience kind of evolve over time to where I always wanted to see the familiar. And then it was like getting to know the geography of the planet in a new way. I mean, I got to the point where I could tell just from the patterns and the colors whether I was flying over a desert in Australia or a desert in Africa. That was cool to get to know. How it evolved to where I was just really interested in what that next surprise would be out the window, what kind of like artistic presentation of Earth would be there for me. And then I'm going to play this little video for you because this sense of interconnectivity of everything, I think where that really became, just beautifully visible and known to me was through the night sky, through the night views of Earth from space, where these flashes of lightning, this beautiful work of art, this light that was below us, made me realize that, these storms that I would experience in what I thought of as my home of Florida growing up, that I thought, oh, this thunderstorm happens in the afternoon, it's happening over me. And when that thunder and lightning is gone, it's just gone. When in fact, the truth is, and I'm just going to play it again because, oops, I'm going to go back and play it again. Maybe it won't let me. The truth is that what this lightning showed to me was that it's not ever just happening in one place. There's a vitality to the planet. The lightning is wrapping itself around the Earth, and it looked like the Earth was alive. Like these were the neurons firing in the brain of the planet. And I think that, that is the reality of our connection. It's the reality of the fact that, Florida, that I thought of as my home, Florida is a special place on a planet that's our home. And I think when you look at Florida, kind of sticking in from the right side of this image, there's no denying in this photo that Florida is part of a planet that's our home. And as we're astronauts observing the Earth, having these experiences, getting this feeling, really being absorbed in this whole planet Earthling thin blue line thing, we are not the only ones in space observing Earth. We have had, since the beginning of spaceflight, there have been satellites and instruments in space that are very purposefully there to measure what's happening on Earth. Pretty much anything you can measure about the health and well-being of our planet is being done from space. This is an eye chart image of the satellites at NASA as part of what we call the Earth fleet that are in space, measuring everything from air quality to moisture to sea level heights and temperatures and carbon dioxide in the air. And it's really taking the pulse of Earth. And it's kind of cool to think about the fact that over 50%, and I would argue probably more likely 75 to 80% of the data that's necessary to understand and then develop solutions in response to climate change are coming to us through space-based systems. And this is something through a European Space Agency model that shows measures of carbon dioxide in the air over a certain period of time. And they like to express it like we're watching Earth breathe from space. I think that's such a beautiful way to think about it. And we can relate to that to ourselves, right? We're breathing in the oxygen, we expel this carbon dioxide, and the Earth is doing the same thing. And depending on how we're behaving on this planet, it's either sucking in more oxygen or breathing out more CO2. And pictures like this can help us better understand that. Now, as astronauts in space, through the knowledge that we're learning from these satellites and all that we're bringing back to Earth, the astronauts ourselves, we want to come back to Earth and share that experience in a way, this Earth observation, this sense of planet Earthling and thin blue line. We all want to do that in a meaningful way. And each of us find our own way to make that happen. For me, it's come through the intersection of space, art, and healing. And I mentioned a little bit about this at the beginning. I'm going to play a little video here too. Hopefully it'll come through. There's no audio. It's just kind of show you how these projects work. But I had the opportunity to paint while I was in space. And I wanted to use art when I got back to Earth to share the experience. And then that led me to working with some people who we formed this group called the Space for Art Foundation, where we work with kids in hospitals and refugee centers and very rural schools around the world to collect artwork that's space themed. Our folks at a company called ILC Dover, they're the ones that made the white spacesuit that I wore to do that spacewalk. They quilt together this artwork, and then it's brought to life through these spacesuits. And then the kids get to see their art come together in these suits. We've had video conferences with the crews on board, the kids in mission controls around the world, and then piped into their hospitals and into the refugee centers so they can see how this has all come together. But again, with the mission of uniting a planetary community of children through the awe and wonder of space exploration and the healing power of art. And through this project, that's how we at the Space for Art Foundation were invited to participate in the COP26 activities with an organization called Actionaid, where Actionaid is really trying to work to raise awareness of, the issues that are happening on our planet, but to do that in a way that allows voices from young people to come together. And I think there's no better way that we've brought voices together than through these art spacesuits. Our latest spacesuit, Beyond, which is on display at the COP activities in the Green Zone. If you happen to make your way to Glasgow, go to the Science Center and check it out. But that suit now has at least one piece of art from at least one child in every country on the planet. So all 192 designated nation states, including the Isle of Man, are represented on this suit. Over 800 pieces of artwork. And Beyond is here, or in Glasgow, to act as the ambassador for Spaceship Earth, with the messaging about this connection between personal and planetary health, which is what I think it's all about. And very thankful to be part of these very historic and I hope worthwhile and action-generating activities. So hopefully you guys recognize where you are in this picture. This is a beautiful image of the Isle of Man from space. It's a rare day when you can get a clear shot of the island like this from the space station. I don't know if Howard Parkin is in the audience or not. Howard, my friend from the observatory, who I did exchange email with while I was on the space station, and we had a really wonderful video conference with kids in schools all over the island as part of that space flight. But I tried several times to send Howard a picture of the Isle of Man from space, and normally he would get this image that just looked like a big white like white solid picture because of the cloud cover. But this is an image that was taken back, I think, on STS-75 a few years before I flew, and I think it's the most beautiful of the Isle of Man from space. And I think there is no denying in this image either that the Isle of Man is part of a planet that's our home. Now, I'm going to close with this iconic image. Hopefully all of you recognize this. This is an image known as Earthrise. This picture was taken back in December of 1968. I believe it was shared with us on Christmas Eve of 1968. And it was taken by the crew of Apollo 8, the first humans to circle the moon and to witness the Earth and to them, in a surprising way, rising above the horizon of another planetary body. And in Bill Anders' words, and I will probably slaughter this in one way or another, but basically his words to us were, we went all this way to discover the moon, and what we discovered was Earth. The best image to show us who and where we all are together in space, to remind us of the planet Earthling's thin blue line, simple lessons from space, and to hopefully act as a call to action for all of us to take on the responsibility of our most important green job, which is as crewmates and not passengers here on Spaceship Earth. Thank you. I think that's the last slide, Rose, I think. Yep. All right, so I'm gonna try to, whoops, go back here. Got to narrate while I do this and stop sharing. All right, did that work?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you, Nicole. That was so interesting. I'm in awe and also very jealous.
Well, I do highly recommend it to anybody. Yes.
I'll try next time.
Take me with you, please.
Just a quick note to everyone else. If you have any questions for Nicole, please type them in the chat. We have one question so far, and we are ahead of time, so we've got plenty of time to chat. I'll read out the first question, and it is actually it's from Sarah, and it's in relation to something that you spoke earlier on in your presentation about space tourism. Sarah understands the value of scientific research in space, but cannot understand the acceptability of what it must be a huge environmental cost of people going into space. Either for tourism or indulgence. Has anyone calculated the environmental cost of each flight into space? It seems inequitable to start taxing long-haul flights on Earth. So she says maybe she's missing a point, but she doesn't really understand it. So from your point of view, can you just share some views on that, Nicole?
Yeah, so I personally am not opposed to what is happening kind of in this evolution of transporting humans to space. And there are, I don't have the numbers for you. I should probably look that up in terms of what the emissions are, or the overall environmental impact of building rockets, flying them to space. I will tell you though that when most of our rockets that we fly to space, the fuel is hydrogen and oxygen. So what you see coming out the bottom of those rockets is steam. It's basically water. So I don't think you can get any more environmentally friendly than that. And that doesn't mean that some rockets are not using fuels that will cause carbon or other emissions. But I look at it from the standpoint of the evolution to something better, to improving life on Earth. We're doing these things with the government space agencies. We've been developing that over time. What government tends to do, which I think is a good thing, is to incentivize public-private partnerships. That's a lot of what is going on now when you see the work that's happening with SpaceX, who are now transporting our astronauts to and from the space station, and that's all of our astronauts that are part of the International Space Station program. And they are also looking at how do you increase the accessibility of spaceflight to more and more people? How do you increase access to space to develop technology that will, from space, improve life on Earth? And even in this phase that we're at right now, just like we had in the world of aviation, where only very wealthy people could afford to get on an airplane and travel from point A to point B, we're seeing that same kind of thing happen now in the commercial space industry as well. But they're like baby steps. They're like the stepping stones to the bigger mission, the bigger plan, even of somebody like Jeff Bezos, that I know gets a bad rap sometimes as well, who is here was here in Glasgow for some of the COP26 meetings, and just pledged $2 billion for restoration activities here on Earth, and an overall $10 billion to conservation and environmental activities on the planet. Is partnered with Prince William on the Earthshot Prize and other conservation and environmental activities, very actively involved in those things. And yes, he flew to space for 3 minutes a couple months ago. Several others flew to space a few weeks ago, including William Shatner, who I think could not have more honestly and transparently conveyed the experience he had in those 3 minutes with his face in front of the window. And he's a good actor, but I don't think he could have pulled that out. I honestly don't believe it was scripted at all. But those suborbital flights are not the goal for Jeff Bezos or for Blue Origin. Those are part of the stepping stones to get to the point where we can start lifting the major industrial things that we have here on Earth that are causing some of our greatest challenges with energy generation and things like that, to get that off the planet into the relatively benign environment of space, and to do that in a thoughtful, sustainable way where you're looking at not just junking up space to lift stuff off Earth, And then in a way, I think of space. I know I'm rambling because this is a big one for me, Sarah. I wish we could sit and talk about it too, because I think there's so much to this that's just being missed. We, with something called space-based solar power, could have space-based solar power plants, systems, whatever you want to call them, in space, orbiting our planet or on the surface of the moon, that have 24-hour access to the energy of the sun, that could then be beamed cleanly back to Earth and distributed in a clean way. That's not even going to happen for us with the solar power plants that we're going to have, based on Earth now, with the wind generation that we're doing. There's all implications to that as well. And we could significantly, in a revolutionary way, transform the way we generate energy for people on this planet by looking at the value of doing those kinds of things in space. And okay, I'm going to stop now. But thanks for asking the question, because it's come up a lot in these last few days. I think Prince William had comments about it. Who was it? Jane Goodall got into the mix the other day, talking about, we need to be spending money. These billionaires need to be spending their money here on Earth to solve Earth's problems without taking it to space. And if you go to Jane Goodall's website, one of the greatest tools for protecting the gorillas, for stopping poaching, for understanding how their ecosystems are being devastated, is through space-based observation. And I think she will admit that as well.
That's great. Thank you for that very comprehensive answer.
I know. Don't know if you expected that one or not.
There is another question from Joe Overty, but before that, I think Sarah just, as a response, she's very grateful for the explanation. Although she's not persuaded of the benefit, but I think
that'll become obvious.
I think, yeah. So anyway, Joe Overty has a question, which is something that we often hear on the Isle of Man. We often hear and read that Isle of Man is too small to make a difference in our in this big planet. Possibly sacrificial efforts will be cancelled out by the small day-to-day actions of bigger nations. And what do you think about that, and how can we respond to that?
Oh my gosh, thanks for the question, Joe. And Joe and I have spoken quite a bit and exchanged emails with really wonderful, comprehensive information about the way the Isle of Man, through not just through this designation as the only country on the planet as a UNESCO biosphere, but I think through very progressive plans for how the island itself is going to handle the way it responsibly deals with these kind of climate change issues, with sustainability, and in the future for life on the island. I wrote about it in my book. I think, like the way we work, the ways we do that on the International Space Station as this crew of 6 or 7 people there, aware of the implications of how we as a crew are impacting our environment, about how we need to be aware of the state of our environment in order to survive. I think you can take that and then model it through, like, the Isle of Man. It's kind of like the station is this island in space. The Isle of Man is this island on a planet that is really, I think, just an amazing example for how we can spread that across, continents, if you will, other islands, continents, that would, is just a way to build it across our island planet in space. And I hope that nothing about what any other place is doing will ever have the Isle of Man thinking that that it's, sacrificial in some way. I think the opposite is true. I think the more we can voice and share what is happening on the Isle of Man and the results of that, the more that other little island communities and bigger communities will be encouraged to take on some of those same kinds of responsible actions as well. I really think that it's true. This ripple effect thing, I think, is truth. I think it's down to us as individuals as well. I've watched it myself within my family and my local community, how if you start, I don't know, living in a certain way, being the example, others will notice and perhaps, follow it too. So I hope the island doesn't stop.
I hope so. I hope we don't too. And yeah, I completely agree with you.
Yeah.
In this case, size does not matter. Next question is from Kate. It's great to know that you were all getting along on board on the space station, but how do you keep the political tensions between different nationalities when you're up in space?
Yeah. That's a great question. And I think that's part of, first of all, I think that's the mentality of working as a crew. And I mean, we're a crew up there that has a commander, right? And while I was there, I had the first European commander as part of our, the crew that we were there with. I think the only program that wasn't represented physically on board the station was Japan, but they're still represented by all of us as crew on board the station. And then I also had a Russian commander on station. I think the way we train together, the rules of engagement that have kind of been put in place about this greater mission we have on the station, where we know that all of the work we're doing together, and I know it sounds a little kumbaya, right? A little kind of, like, oh, how could people possibly get along like this? But it's true. We work peacefully, successfully there. That's the 6 or 7 people on the station. There are tens of thousands of people on the planet across those 5 different space agencies and those, 15 different countries that are also working together peacefully and successfully. Now, that doesn't mean that political tensions don't come up, but we've established the way that we're going to work those things out for the benefit of the program and the mission of the program. And honestly, I believe that the way we have done that and the way we have continued now for 21 years of continuous human presence representing these 15 countries in space, the way we've done that and continue to do it, I really think those relationships are helping us temper the way things are going on between our governments here on the planet. And I am thankful for that, because I don't know how much worse it would be, but I think that because we have these relationships in space and we're working together for this greater good of life on Earth, the way we deal with each other here on Earth is much better off for us. I don't know if that answered the question or not.
I think it did. Thank you. Thank you for that. Yeah. We have another question from Adrian. We know Adrian, he works at the Met Office. So his question is, thanks for your presentation and great photos. As you say, our lower atmosphere is relatively thin, but it contains many gases, moisture and energy. So can you please describe the most exciting or largest weather systems you were lucky enough to observe in space? Was it, for example, a tropical cyclone, hurricane, or a long waving weather front over the Pacific or Atlantic? It's a really interesting question, I think.
Yeah, yes, all of that, which is really cool. And that's why I like to try to show the night, the night sky too. I mean, it was there, you were never disappointed with the light show that was going to come at night with just lightning, like it was just always going to be there wrapping around the Earth. I think the most impressive to me, though, was the hurricanes. These massive, like just white, billowy, spiraling storms moving across the ocean, from one continent to the next. As I mentioned earlier, I grew up in Florida, so very aware of hurricanes and the impact that has down on Earth. And it was interesting to me to be on the space station watching this, this massive storm move across, with this perfectly shaped center, that you could see down the middle of the eye, like making its way across the ocean towards what might be the place you consider home, and looking at it like it was beautiful. I mean, from that vantage point, it was stunning, just billowy and white and like it was alive and making its way, and like you were watching it with the mute button on. Almost, you're not hearing any sound of that storm. You're not feeling the wind from it or anything. You're just watching it swirl and move across the ocean. And yet at the same time, you're watching it and you're feeling kind of guilty because you're thinking, oh my gosh, there is no way that whoever is living underneath or in the path of that storm is feeling or appreciating the white billowiness of it, the beauty of it. They're just worried about surviving. And I think that was a reality check for me too, is that Earth, in whatever you look at from space, fires burning, the massive plumes of smoke that are moving in these trails, across the planet too, dust from Africa, the Sahara moving across the ocean towards the rainforests in South America. I mean, you see all of that and the color of it and the motion of it, and it's gorgeous from space. And yet, in contrast, that same beauty is not being experienced on the planet. And then it gets you thinking about, like in the last question, the political turmoil of things, the fact that people are not necessarily behaving like crewmates and wanting to ensure that, life is equitable and that we survive in a healthy, happy way in every place on Earth. And you get back to Earth and you want to figure out what's your way to be part of the solution in what I like to think of as, and I said it at the end of the video, I mean, I really do believe that we have the power to make decisions that will create a future for all life on Earth that's as beautiful as it looks from space. And I think that's a pretty compelling thing to think about.
Thank you. Just looking through the questions. We've got 2 questions here, so I'll read the next question. If we need to explore exciting new opportunities for generating energy via space, is that an indication that we are living beyond our means and that we should live in such a way that we can sustain ourselves within our own earthly resources, i.e. not expect that we will always find ways to meet our constantly growing energy consumption?
No, I don't think so. I think it's just looking at space, as we have up until now, for alternative solutions to the the energy that we need, for instance, right? Even for the population that we have right now, there are cleaner, better ways for us to generate the power that we need. And that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be evaluating, the way we live in certain ways. Maybe we can conserve in different ways. Maybe we can, look at these alternatives so that we're not damaging the planet the same way we are through our current sources. I think it's just a matter of looking at space as another resource. I mean, Earth is this place in space, and thinking about space as a resource for us is not I don't think there's anything evil about that in any way, as long as we pursue it in, with sustainability in mind. We understand that not doing things that way, the kind of the state that we're in right now, right? I don't think anybody went in with malicious intentions when when fossil fuels were first known to be a way to to generate power, to generate means of transportation. But we learned, right? And so now we've got to adjust how we utilize those. I think the same is true for, I drive an electric car. Chris and I have gone down to one car, it's electric, and yet I still feel like, okay, can I be happy about, totally happy about doing this? On the one hand, I am. I know I'm not spewing, the exhaust out the back of my car anymore. But I also know that we haven't really looked at this in a way that says, okay, where did the materials for that battery come from? What's going to happen to it at the end of its life? Those are kinds of things that, that we really need to be thinking about from a life cycle standpoint when we, completely shift our, the way we do things. We've got to look at it not just because, oh, here's the immediate satisfaction I can get out of driving an electric car and not be doing this thing that's harming the environment in one way, but how ultimately is that going to be part of a longer term issue or solution? And I think the same is true for how we go forward with using space-based systems to support life here on Earth.
Great, thank you. The next question is from Richard. Nicole, has your own perception of Earth, its future, and man's impact been changed by your experience in space?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's, the whole reality of like kind of being slapped in the face with these simple things that I knew when I was a 5-year-old, right? That I live on a planet, that's not a new thing for me, right? But I don't think I really contemplated the significance of that in my day-to-day life. And what I would also argue is you don't have to go to space to see Earth from space to know that you live on a planet, right? And you don't have to be impressed by the awe and wonder of seeing Earth from space to appreciate the awe and wonder that's around us every day here on Earth with our feet planted firmly on it. I mean, you guys live in a place that is one of the most stunning I have ever experienced in my life here on Earth. Pretty much any place you can stand on the Isle of Man, you spin around, and it is awesome. It's wonderful. And what I love is that you're, as a community, really trying to ensure that that is sustained. And I mean, I look forward to the day I come back to the island and it is all electric cars, because I don't know why it isn't already. And it's been thought about, we're only going to buy electric cars that, source their battery materials from this place, that have a life cycle plan for what happens to them when they're at their end of life. I mean, I look forward to that happening. But my perspective has absolutely changed, and I think it's just a greater understanding of this planet as our spaceship, this planet as our life support system, and how we need to behave like crew to ensure not only we as the humans survive, but that all life and our planet as that ecosystem survives to sustain us for as long as the sun is going to allow that to happen, right? And that's a big deal. I mean, it's a big deal for me. I don't go a day now without that Planet Earthling thin blue line, you need to be a crewmate, Nicole, going on in my brain. And I want everybody to feel that way.
Great, thank you. The next is just a message from Jo. She says she's been communicating with Howard Parkin, and he sends this message. Hello, Nicole. I got the book yesterday when we got home. Looking forward to reading it. And hope you're enjoying Glasgow.
Well, and I hope everybody's going to read Howard's new book too. I wrote the foreword for it, and it's all about like stargazing, like observing space from Earth. And you have one of the most wonderful observatories there in the center of, I encourage everybody to reach out to the Astronomical Society and to visit that place. I went there, I just have to share the story. So Howard invited us out a few years ago, and I took my mother-in-law, Liz, with us. And talk about awe and wonder and watching somebody else experience it. It was so cool. They had the telescope set up out there. It was one of those like pitch black, can't see your hand in front of your face, clear sky days on the island. And we had Liz up in the, where the scope was, and they had Saturn in the view. And it was like perfectly clear. You could see the sphere of Saturn as the planet. You could see all the rings around it. You could even pick out some of the moons, like the dots of lights of the moons around Saturn. And I watched Liz look through that telescope, and just, you could see her like almost shaking as she's seeing Saturn through a telescope for the very first time in her life. And I mean, I get goosebumps thinking about it now. And it's just like, there is awe and wonder everywhere. And I am so thankful to Howard for sharing that with as many people as he can. I know it's like his mission in life. And he just wrote a really wonderful book to talk about, the Isle of Man as one of these, one of the most perfect dark sky places on the planet, and how everyone should appreciate that. Yeah.
Very Howard's great. I've heard him talk a couple of times. I've not been to the observatory, but he gets so excited talking about it all. It's just so infectious.
Yeah, I mean, how cool is that? I mean, that's what you should be doing, right? And then that kind of thing, I think, inspires people to want to appreciate what's around them, to want to take care of it. I mean, just again, looking at who and where you are in from a whole new perspective. I think the same is true looking up, at space from Earth as it is the other way around.
Great, thank you. We've got another question from Ali. Hello, Nicola. Hello, Nicole. What was your key takeaway from COP?
Well, I was not one of those people in what they call the blue zone, where all the the big leaders are and that kind of thing. I was in the green zone, and I was working on some pretty smaller scale activities. But I had the opportunity through Actionaid to work with three young folks who came to the conference from different places on the planet. They're climate activists in their own local communities, and they are, through Actionaid, been given the opportunity to work in a network of of young folks around the world, learning from each other, sharing stories about their own experiences, not just in how climate-related things have affected them, but just their lifestyle in general, and to look to each other for solutions. One of the young women, Safa, was from Jordan. Ali was from, I learned how to pronounce this now, Tanzania, as I always used to say it. And then Monica from Kenya. And what I loved about it is, I think through even these smaller, still global planetary community kinds of connections, you see the real power in bringing people from around the world together, and to look at the potential solutions to our greatest challenges, and to see the hope, and these three young people coming from places where I could never imagine having to grow up and live in the situations that they have grown up and lived in, and be able to come out of that hopeful. And they are, because they have had the chance to learn from others. They've had the chance to come to places like Glasgow and see a bigger perspective on how we can resolve these kinds of things as crewmates, as Earthlings. And they were speaking in that way even before I got to them. They were using different words, but it was very much the same idea of, man, we are all on one planet. Everything that we do on one side of this earth is going to affect the lives of everyone on the other side of the earth. And I mean, they already get it. And that makes me really, really hopeful. And I think what's going to come out of COP26 for me is that there is hope, and that people really and truly do want to work together to solve these problems. And actually, I'd like to see some of what our leaders are doing in the green zone or in the blue zone together, and these really very orchestrated, formal events. I'd like to see them get out into the green zone, experience it a little bit more in kind of a raw way that I think would be very much more eye-opening and perspective changing than some of the formal stuff that goes on.
Thank you. I'm just looking at the time, so it's nearly 8 o'clock. We might wrap this up shortly. But just reflecting on what you said about being crewmates. Sorry, my notifications. It's just I made some notes. So basically, be a crewmate. It's just so I remember after this speech. It's like, so what really struck me was, like, in amongst, like, having each other's back and looking something from new perspective was to also have fun. And I think that was something that quite resonated with me, because it's all about, like, enjoying what you do. It's not just doing and not enjoying it. Do you know what I mean? I think that was something that was quite an interesting point that you pulled out, I thought.
Well, I'm glad you raised that, because I think that, there are certain cases where it's just not going to be joyful, right? As you're trying to overcome something, as you're really trying to solve a problem, whatever it might be. But I get the sense, through Joe, through you guys, through the conversations I've had with Rowan Henthorne. She's, I met her after, after the, kind of the around the world, or the sailing adventure she had with the women crew that she was on, and was really inspired by what they had done and how that came. I kind of think about that, like, bringing that back to Earth. She went off on this sailing voyage to, the far reaches of the Pacific Ocean to explore what's happening with plastics, and, and figure out if there's ways to solve that problem, which has to happen from, from dry land. It's, the oceans aren't generating that plastic themselves, right? And it was kind of like in the conversation we had, and I have it in the book too. They were enjoying themselves on that sailing adventure, right? Even though they were going out to explore something that's one of the most devastating things that's happening on Earth. This was a group of women coming together, curious about something, excited to see how they might have an impact on it, a positive impact on it. And while Rowan was bringing that back to the Isle of Man, I kind of equate it to like bringing it back to Earth. She's bringing the way they lived and worked as a crew on that sailing vessel back to the island, back to Earth. And I get the sense of joy from all of you and what you're doing through the UNESCO Biosphere activities. I follow along on social media with every possible Isle of Man, account that there is to see what's happening. And I mean, I can't remember whose question was earlier, if that was Ali or someone else, about what the island is doing and the effect it can have. Oh my gosh, beach buddies. It's like, that's a good time getting out there with your community and knowing that you're doing something to benefit, the island as a whole, and not just the island, but everything you're picking up off that beach is not going to get into the water and end up in the other side of the Pacific Ocean where Rowan was sailing. And that's a good thing. I mean, that's a good, joyous thing. And all of this, I think the ultimate goal for the future is that we can have a future where all life is happy and healthy, and that when things do go wrong, where there is a threat to our life support system, we recognize it as something that's affecting us all, and then we want to get together to fix it. Seems simple, I know.
We've got a question here from Andrew. I was just about to wrap it up. He loves your upbeat approach and your optimism, and I think we all do. It's very inspiring. But he says, he asked, in addition to the hope and optimism due to the young people's enthusiasm, are you optimistic that the political leaders will deliver on their declarations? It seems like we have moved from doom and gloom to excitement of possibilities.
Well, I'll tell you, I will remain hopeful for that as well. I think there's never a guarantee that every single, leader country that participated is going to go off and implement exactly what they committed to. I can't say that that's going to happen, right? I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that it will. I think that what we've seen, and I watch this around here too, the response that people have had to sharing solutions and looking for a positive path forward versus blah, 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 gloom and doom. It's your fault. What are you going to do about it? Those kinds of things don't resonate with the masses. I don't believe. And even in the art that we did with the kids for the Beyond art spacesuit, what we asked of them was to, consider Earth as their planetary home in this universe, right? How do they see Earth now? How would they represent Earth now? And how do they want it to be when they grow up 50 years from now, when they're, as old as their parents are, or, like me, what do they want Earth to be like? And that is I think there's so much more power in getting our kids to think that way than to have them say, oh, 50, and this gets me like, 1969, Earth was so wonderful. And in 2069, it's going to be this dystopic, nightmare. That doesn't do our kids any good. And oh, by the way, in 1969, Earth was not, in the United States, rivers were catching fire. People couldn't breathe the air. The water was not clean. I think in London, when you blew your nose, you got black in your tissue because of the pollution that was in the air. And so things have improved over time. And now we've got new challenges to overcome. And I want when he has kids, I want them to be thinking about, okay, how is it now? what are our challenges, and how do we come together to find optimistically, look and believe there's a solution, first of all, work in a way that I learned how to work as a space agency person, which is with the approach that of here's how we can, not why we can't, and envision and work towards the future that we believe in and that we want. That's a very different approach than, here's why we can't do this, or it's your fault that we're in this situation, you better fix it, I'm not going to do anything. I mean, that is just so damaging in so many ways.
Thank you. I agree with you. I feel like hope and optimism are so powerful, so powerful. So I think with that, we end our session today. Thank you very much, Nicole. Just a quick note to everyone else. As I mentioned earlier on in the program, we have a program of events here on the island for the next few days. So next week we have a webinar with Professor James Curran, which is a prominent climate change scientist, to talk about the link between climate change emergency and biodiversity crisis, which will be very interesting. And our last webinar will be with a psychologist called Rebecca Nestor, and it's all about how to create conversations on climate change. It's often seen as a very emotional topic, but it's something that's necessary to be made like a daily conversation. So how do you approach that? And so you can get the information on our website. Thank you very much, Nicole. We're very, very lucky to have you today. And you've been so inspirational. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today. You can get this recorded of this session on our website and on YouTube. Thank you.
Thanks.